Hi, I'm Annie Botticelli, and this is the Storyteller Forecast for Gemini for September 2015. Go to my website, aspiritualspark.com, to see more about my current offerings and to sign up for my free email newsletter, which makes you part of my community and gives you access to all the perks that goes along with that. So we've got a wild month of September. We've got Venus retrograde energy, we've got Mercury retrograde, and we have the big, huge eclipses that often bring radical change and sometimes all of a sudden. So we're going to talk about all of these things. Let's talk about them individually. Let's start with Venus retrograde. Venus is going to go direct on September 6th. It's been retrograde since July 25th. So from July 25th through September 6th, we had Venus retrograde. The shadow period started at the end of June, and then the shadow period afterwards lasts until October 9th. So essentially the whole month of September is still covered in Venus retrograde. So we've got a theme that is very consistent with retrogrades. Venus retrograde, Mercury retrograde, even the eclipses. This is a time to try things on, but to not commit to the things that you're trying on. And this theme, like I said, is if we were just talking about Venus retrograde, that would be what I would recommend. If we're just talking about Mercury retrograde, that would be what I would recommend. And the eclipse time is definitely a time to not initiate new things, but to respond to the things that come to you. So this month we're kind of in a holding pattern, but we're in a holding pattern that is going to somehow bring massive amounts of change even without you trying to do anything. And this is a time to kind of sit back and go back over things. So let's talk about Venus retrograde. I've done a separate video on Venus retrograde that I highly recommend that you watch, because Venus rules love and beauty and money and commitments and business and design projects, and that's a huge part of our lives. This is, most of the questions I get have to do with love, business, and money, and this planet is ruling these things, and it's retrograde. So I can't do justice to the information I want to share in this video because we have to deal with the eclipses and other things. So search on my channel, Annie Botticelli, YouTube, Venus retrograde, and watch that video so that you can get fully prepped for the energy that's continuing into October as to the do's and don'ts and how to sort of thrive in that transit. Okay, so that's happening. Then we have Mercury retrograde. Mercury retrograde starts September 17th officially and runs through October 8th, but the shadow period started August 29th, and the shadow period goes until the end of October. So what is a shadow period? I talk more about this in the individual Venus retrograde video, and I also just recently posted a new Mercury retrograde video, because Mercury rules transportation and communication, which is the other huge portion of our lives that we have every day, moment to moment, just massive amounts of involvement in our interactions. And I can't do justice in this video about all the Mercury retrograde do's and don'ts. So definitely check that out as well. But a little summary is that it's time to go backwards and try things on, right? Okay, so this is what we're talking about. So let's say you want to buy a new car. September is not the month to buy a new car if you can at all help it, but it's a great time to go test drive things, to go price things out, to see how much your insurance would be if you have this certain kind of car, to do price checks, to see what the market is for that type of vehicle. It's a time for research. The same thing for a computer or a phone. Rather than buying a new phone in that time or a new computer in that time, if you can at all help it, this is a time to try things on, to ask people who have those things how they feel, to look at what people are writing online, to see what the customer support is for those things, to see if it has the features that you need. This is an amazing time. Retrograde is an amazing time for researching things, reconsidering things, and that would be really good use of the energy. If you have to buy a phone or a car, I go into a lot of what to do if you have to buy one of those things in the Mercury retrograde video. So you can refer to that for those questions. But this whole month of September still has this energy of just kind of trying things on. That's really the theme. So then we have the eclipses. September 13th, we have solar eclipse at 20 degrees of Virgo, and we have the lunar eclipse on September 27th at 4 degrees of Aries. Now, like every other transit pretty much, we don't just experience these eclipses on the day that they actually happen, or at those moments in the sky when the eclipse is actually happening. The energy starts much sooner and lasts much longer, so you might have started to receive eclipse-related news even at the beginning of August, which is quite a while beforehand. So that's about 6 weeks beforehand you can start to receive news about eclipses. And there's bigger themes at play with the eclipses. So the length of time for that series of eclipses by sign, which spans about 2 to 3 years, that is the umbrella under which a theme is going on in your life. So for instance, we've got two polarities at play with these eclipses. We have the Aries-Libra polarity, which has been going on since 2013 and continues into 2016. And then we have the Pisces-Virgo eclipses, which started in spring of 2015 and go into 2017. So the story of Aries-Libra, which is me versus we, myself and my relationship to myself and my relationship to other people and my relationship with other people and who I am in my relationship with other people, is massively going under this radical transformation. So if we just looked at this eclipse set, we'd be getting part of the story, okay? Me versus we. Some relationship changing and evolving how we relate to other people. But this story has been very much activated since 2013. And before that, the last eclipse cycle that had Aries-Libra highlighting was 2004 to 2006. So if you think of what was going on in your life between 2004 and 2006, there's this radical story of me versus we, who I am in relationship, who I am not in relationship, powerful relationships made, powerful breakups, this polarity between me and we has been highlighted. And that is very strong, again, continuing into this eclipse cycle. So specifically the lunar eclipse, which removes energy from one's life, which closes something, which ends chapters, that is happening in the sign of Aries. So lunar eclipses happen on full moons, and it's like the energy of 3 full moons. So a full moon that has an eclipse occurring simultaneously is like the energy of a full moon in triplicate. So that emotional, welling up, ending, closing, saying goodbye energy of a full moon is multiplied by 3. And that's part of why these eclipses are so powerful and why they last, their energies last longer. So Aries energy is about the self, and that can be anything in a higher vibration of like self-care, or a lower vibration of self-indulgence in addictions or habits or something that's not working. With every sign, every placement, every transit, we have this spectrum of experience that we can have, running from lowest to highest. And so we don't ever know for each individual exactly where on that spectrum this is going to occur, but we do know that some ending is going to happen with relationship to self. And for many of you, this can be the ending of an addiction, the ending of certain things that you were doing focused on yourself that either weren't serving, or the time for those has just passed. Maybe they were serving and now it's time to do some other things. The solar eclipse happens on the new moon, and it opens up new energy. And this solar eclipse is in the sign of Virgo. So Virgo energy has very much to do, oh, by the way, so it's like the solar eclipse is like the new moon in triplicate. So it's like 3 new moons. So the openings, the new beginnings, the new chapters, the golden opportunities that come with new moon energy is multiplied by 3. So the energy of Virgo is the 6th house, and the 6th house has to do with your daily routine. It's called the mundane reality. So there's a lot of things in this grouping that can be opening as new. This is the house of health and diet. There could be a situation where someone has a health crisis from this full moon in Aries, where something with their physical body is affected, and that leads them to new openings in their diet and their health regimen and meditation. This is also the house of yoga. It's also the house of mainstream medicine and diagnostic labs and tests and things like that. And it's also the house of using the body and mind to work together, as they do anyway, using the awareness of body and mind to improve your life. So, and nutrition and acupuncture and things like that are also in that house. This is also the house of pets, anything having to do with animals. So something new happening there, whatever the different ways that can look like, a new pet or a new relationship with a current pet or whatever else. There's so many ways that can look. The relationship to pets in general. And then this is the house of your just what happens every day. So if you go to work every day, then it would be your work environment, something new there, maybe a new boss, or a new job or a new position. Or if you're at home every day, something different about your daily schedule. Maybe, you know, around that time, kids are going to be going back to school. So for some people, you're going to be having kids who were home all the time, who are now not home, and now you have a whole different work schedule or home schedule because the child isn't present, or your child is coming home and staying home because they just graduated from college or something. And now your schedule looks completely different. So there's, you know, any different way this can look, there's some radical change, but it looks to me like the change will be positive because the solar eclipse energy is pretty unencumbered by negative aspects, and solar eclipses generally will bring new opportunities and new openings that tend to be positive. So there's this closing off of some energy and this opening up, and the energies are equal. So the energy that ended is equal to the energy that's opening up. And this is the law of the universe, that energy is neither created nor destroyed, it simply changes form. This is this law at play, and the eclipses so beautifully illustrate this law of the universe. I've often seen it happen and heard of it happen where maybe someone, like a grandfather, will pass away as a grandchild is born around eclipse time. And the energy that passing of that person has left in the lives of the people who are left is equal to the opening of this new child coming into life. You know, and that very beautifully shows us this energy. And sometimes the eclipses do involve actually a literal death and a literal birth, but much of the time it's a figurative death and a figurative birth. You know, that's the energy at play here. So specifically for Geminis, depending on your placement of Gemini, if you haven't heard, if this is new to you, the degree of your placement, early, middle, or late, I did a good explanation of this in many videos previously, but specifically in August, I talked about the difference between early, middle, and late placements. So you may want to refer back to that to understand this a little more. But basically, there's a circle that we have the whole zodiac around. So imagine, you know, the zodiac signs are in this circle, and the circle has 360 degrees. That's how we measure the circle. And 360 divided by 12 is 30 degrees. So there's 30 degrees in each sign. So the planets move through these different degrees of the signs, and wherever that snapshot of where all the planets were at that moment you were born, that is your birth chart. And so wherever your sun sign is or your rising sign is, it's going to be anywhere from 0 to 29 degrees of whatever sign it's in. And how the horoscopes affect you, how the planetary alignments affect you, is going to be dependent on what degree those have. So if you are a person that watches Gemini horoscopes because you're a Gemini and you don't always find resonance with them, it could be that you're a very early degree Gemini or a very late degree Gemini, and perhaps your horoscope has more in common with the one before if you're an early degree, or after if you're a late degree. So you can do a free birth chart search online to see the degrees of your sun and your rising sign, whatever you're watching for, so you can help determine this. But the placement of the eclipse and the influence of the eclipse is going to be a little bit different depending on exactly what your placements are. So for the early degree placements and some middle degree placements, the lunar eclipse is going to happen in the 11th house. The 11th house is a house that rules groups and teams and social interactions, including on the internet. It also does rule the internet and other technological advancements. It rules organizations, humanitarian efforts, the spirit of the group, the spirit of the community, something with you being placed in a bigger picture. Okay, so that energy is closing off in some way. So maybe you leave a group, maybe a club closes that you were involved with, maybe you don't feel resonance any longer with a certain part of a tribe that you were a part of, or a certain group of people that you were spending time with. Sometimes it's a specific friend that is eclipsed out, where maybe they'll move away, or in other ways a friend leaves your life. This is the house of friends, acquaintances. And the energy is opening up towards the bottom of your chart in the 5th house. And the 5th house has to do with your personal pleasure, your creativity, what you love to do, your romance, your fun, your hobbies. So something with you involved with group and community closes out and then something opens up with your own personal expression. So that's going to be for early and middle degree placements. And some of you later degree placements may also experience this because we can't see your chart. And depending on what other planets you have where, you know, we don't really know. So it could manifest for all of you in some ways that way. But for the later degree placements, it's more likely that you'll have this shift a little bit. And I'll go there in just a second. But I want to talk more about the solar eclipse in the 5th house. The 5th house has to do with children, and it has to do with creativity. Some people will have something new involving child. They'll have a pregnancy. They'll have a child that's born. They'll have an adoption. They'll have a child come into their life that is important to them in some way, or a project working with children will come into their lives or move along a continuum. Some people don't have their own children, but their projects, their creative projects are their babies. And some people have children and they still have creative projects that are their babies. And I've often seen eclipses work on multiple layers. So you might not just have one manifestation of a lunar eclipse or one manifestation of a solar eclipse. You might have multiple ones. So maybe you find out you're pregnant and you have this huge creative project that is, you know, come into being or is birthed. So remember, I started out with the retrogrades purposely to remind you that if you have this new thing birthing in September and you have to launch something officially, try to wait till the end of October. You know, you have to feel into your intuition for your own situation, and there are going to be personal planets and aspects that can supersede certain general horoscope recommendations. But the time for launching is still better at the end of October, because in September, even though new pieces are coming in where you can kind of see a glimpse of where things are going, you might not have all the information, and the energy isn't completely clear for rushing forth. The best way I illustrate this understanding is the story I tell about being, you know, on an island where you were deserted there somehow, and you're trying to get off, and you build a boat, and you're going to launch the boat to try to get off. You don't launch the boat when the tide is coming in. You launch the boat when the tide is going out, right? Because otherwise you'll just be paddling into the tide and it's pushing you back and you're stressing out and you don't wind up making off the island, and it's totally dramatic and was totally unnecessary because you just could have waited till the tide was going out. And that's what is indicated here with these retrogrades. If you try to push something forward when all of this energy is going backwards, you're going against the tide, and you're not going to make it out as far, or your project's not going to make it out as far as it would if you waited until the energies were naturally going out, which is going to happen more towards the end of October. So it doesn't mean you can't say yes to an opportunity. Many people are going to have opportunities come in September that they'll say yes to. Just try to leave some flexibility around what you're agreeing to, because things are going to change. Either your image or your vision, your image of what you're getting yourself into, your circumstances, the vision, something is going to shift, and you'll wish that you didn't commit to it being exactly a certain way. So just maintain the flexibility. And if you can, try things on. You know, this theme of trying things on is very strong. Okay, so now for some of you middle degree placements and for you later degree Gemini placements, you're going to have the lunar eclipse, this ending of energy, happen in your 10th house, which has to do with your career and work and life purpose. Now, some people have their career, work, and life purpose very strongly tied in with their 11th house. So if you're an early placement and this is true, then you might have a 10th house manifestation even if the eclipse is officially happening in your 11th house, because they're tied together. So that what I'm saying is, if your work is in something involving a big organization or humanitarian efforts or with a group or social media or internet-based things, then you might have an ending to something work-related even though it's not happening in your 10th house of work. So some kind of closing. Some people are going to lose their jobs. Some people are going to leave their jobs purposely. Some people are going to go part-time. You know, there's a lot of energy around just a closing off in this house of work and career and life purpose and your place in the world. And the energy is opening up down at the bottom of your chart in the house of home. So a classic explanation of how I've seen this happen is somebody leaves their job to spend more time with their family. Maybe because they find out they're pregnant and they don't want to work, or they're delivered a baby and they don't want to work. You can see how this is tied here. Or they lose their job without wanting to, but then that gives them time for these home projects and these creative projects, you know? So this energy, this theme of this eclipse cycle is very much closing off something that's happening with your place out in the world and putting it closer to your projects and your home and your family and even real estate and investment matters, because that's the 4th house as well. The 10th house also has to do with authority figures, which could be bosses, and father figures, or the energy of like a masculine, strong type of energy in your chart, and that can come in many different forms. So a closing off. Some people will have their boss get fired or, you know, promoted, and they'll have a different boss, you know, and that's going to dramatically affect their experience. So that's the general story of how these openings are occurring. For when people have a solar eclipse in their 4th house, I've seen them have a new roommate, I've seen them have a new house, I've seen them move to a new house, whether, you know, either in one case they would buy a new house, in another case they would move to a new place without buying it. Very often a new person moves in, or their home space gets bigger, or maybe one of their kids gets married and now they have an in-law who's part of the family, or a parent comes to stay or live with them, you know, or a child comes in, or a new partner comes in and they live in the house. All of these changes that I'm talking about are very unlikely to be all said and done in the month of September. You'll get inklings or news as to the direction it's going, but the odds that all of it's going to shake down in September are very low. And that's actually better in a lot of ways, because it's all the retrograde energy we talked about. So if you have a situation where you're wanting a new love, or someone you've been with for a while, to move in your house, try to avoid doing that during the month of September, because your moving in date is like a birth date, and it locks in a lot of energy. And the retrograde, Venus retrograde, is going to be locking in energy of going backwards instead of going forwards with your relationship. So, you know, if there's a lot of different ways you can look at this, but making huge commitments in love is still not indicated, even if an eclipse brings in an opportunity. You know, so if you get news about, oh, hey, your boyfriend's lease is going to be up, and maybe they're going to want to move in or something like that, try to see if they can have a temporary accommodation, not at your house, until it gets to be the end of October and the energy is better for making a long-term commitment like that. Because if you've ever lived with anybody, you know that once they live there, it's really hard to say, oh, well, now I'm going to get my own place, but you already live together, and that's it's harder that way, you know? So you want to just set the stage for these changes that are coming to be the most supported as possible. But lots of home energy opening up for many Geminis. So I can't see what's going on in your personal chart. I'd like very much to. If you'd like to have a personal reading, you can go to my website, aspiritualspark.com. And while you're there, you can see more about my 28-day virtual coaching program called Shine, which has 28 podcasts and 28 videos that cover a moon cycle, but you can do it at your own pace as well, that help you to shift the nature of your experience and really bring your brilliance into the world. And that's available on a sliding scale. And you can also check out my Unleash Your Money Magnet webinar, which is a power-packed, over 2 hours worth of helping you shift your money paradigm. And definitely sign up for my free email newsletter. My email community gets a written account of what is about to happen in the month ahead in my email newsletter. And there's other perks that go along with that. So do it. I hope you have a wonderful month, and I'll see you soon. Bye.